Okay, our lesson today, we're going to start looking at data structures. So data structures are used to store more complex data. So far the type of data that we've looked at have been stored in variables. Okay, and a variable is basically one piece of data storing in one bucket. Okay, so here's a picture. If we set aside a bucket that's going to store a name, then we can put one name into that bucket. Now, data in the real world doesn't work like that often because we would have something like a class list, and that's a whole collection of names. We would have something like a playlist being stored to store music, and that would be a whole collection of songs. Okay, all of those top 10 lists that you see on the internet, they're not one data element being stored in one variable, they're an array of data. So you've got something ranked at number 1, something ranked at number 2, and so on. And so that data needs to be stored in a collection of data. And so arrays help us to get that real world data into the computer. Okay, so an array, so for example, if we have an array of names, then what we could do is have a name referred to by its index. And so you can see here I've got this collection of 3 buckets that are each going to be able to store a name. And rather than having to call each of these buckets a different variable name, we can call the collection of buckets name and then just refer to them by their index, by the number that that bucket, that storage location has. So if you have a look at my example here, name 1 could be Tony, name 2 could be Jordan, and name 3 could be Casey. And so those 3 names can be stored in an array of data, a collection of data, but referred to by their individual indexes. Okay, so they have multiple spots where you can store data. Okay, so we're going to have a go at creating something like that in Visual Studio. So if you can pause me now and start Visual Studio, open up a new console project. So we're going to create a console project to create a playlist and enter songs into the different items within that playlist. So start Visual Studio and then go to File, go to a new project. As I said, we're going to create a console application to store this playlist. And so let's just call it Playlist Console. And then click OK. Make sure you've started a console application. So you'll remember that the main function is where we write our code in a console application. So find the main function and the starting curly brackets and the finishing curly brackets. Press enter a couple of times so that you can then easily enter code into that. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to have to do now is actually create our array. So whenever you create a new variable, you always start with the type, and so this is going to be a string, and you'll notice I've used square brackets at the end. The square brackets at the end indicate that this is going to be an array of strings rather than a single string. We're going to call this variable playlist, and I need a space between where I've got that and that, and then we're going to give it an initial value. So we're going to say this is going to be starting as an initial value of strings, and let's say that our playlist is going to have 10 values in it, so we can do the top 10 songs for our playlist. Okay, and that's set up now in memory, a storage location to actually store the songs that are going to go into our playlist. And we've told it to set aside not one storage location, but to set aside 10 storage locations. And so now we can go about the process of actually putting data into that array. So because we're using a console, we're going to start with console WriteLine to make it a little bit friendly. And we'll set up our WriteLine statement. Now I'm going to make this one a little title just to tell people what I'm doing. So this is going to be my top 10 playlist creator. And we'll finish with a funky little plus dash dash. That's going to be the title that appears on the console, so people know that when they run my application what they're actually getting into. Now we're going to use a loop. So remember, you write the word for and then simply press tab a couple of times and it will set up the loop structure for you. Now we have 10 items that we want to read into our array because we're going to enter in 10 songs. So the length of our loop is going to be changed to 10. And so now what we're going to do is go inside of our loop and actually get each of those songs. So we're going to say console.write, and I'm just going to use write this time. And what song would you like to be number? And then I'm going to use some tricky little C sharp we're using, aren't we? Coding to convert the number to the end to string. Because we've got this variable called I, what I'm actually going to do is write the value of I at the end of this line. And so that way we're now going to be able to say, what song would you like to be number? And the first time it's going to go through, it's going to say the number 0. And then each time it goes through, it will progressively increment that by 1. Now we don't want it to start at 0, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually say at 0 plus 1. In an array, the first item is always called the 0 item, just to be a little bit complex. Okay, so we're going to say, what song would you like to be number 1? And then I'm going to add a little bit of an extra string at the end. I'll just put a colon and a dash so the person knows that I'm expecting them to enter something at the end of that line. And then what we're going to do is actually read that value from the console. So we're just going to say that the playlist value I, you remember that I is currently equal to 0, is going to be equal to console.readLine, and finish that line. And that's it. So because we've got this loop set up, it's going to loop through this 10 times, and it's going to, each time that loop runs, it's going to say, what song would you like to be number 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And each time it does the loop, it's going to sit there flashing, waiting for the user to read. So if I've done this correct, I should now be able to run this. And let's just put a little pause here at the end just so that you can actually see it running. Console reader key. So that's just going to sit there flashing at the very end, waiting for me to press enter again after I've done my 10 entries. So let's run that and see what happens. So what song would I like to be song number 1? I'm just going to go with letters of the alphabet, but you could write a full song in. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, and I'm coming up to number 10, so this should be my last one. J is my last song that I'm entering in, and you can see it's now entered in those 10 values. And when I press a key, my program will enter. Those values are currently stored in the computer's memory for us to access. And so the next thing we're going to do is feed those back to the user. So let's find our key here, console read key, and what I'm going to do is after they've entered, I'm just going to clear the console altogether. So let's just go console clear, and that'll clear our screen for us. Now we want to display those songs. So we're going to repeat the same type of process that we did before, and this time we're going to say console.write your playlist is, oh, and I can't spell playlist, just like that. And now we're going to set up a loop again to actually output all of those names. So let's press enter for, once again I just press tab a few times to get my loop happening. Once again the length is going to be 10, and this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to write the value of what was stored in our array. So let's say console.write a line, finish with a semicolon. We'll make it a little bit pretty and actually tell them song number 1 is, and so on. So let's start with a string. Actually, I'll just write them so you can see it. So we're going to simply write the values that are in our playlist value I. Now you could pretty this up by, just like we did here, saying what song would you like to be number I. Here you could actually say song number 1 is, and then write the playlist value just by using the little plus to join the strings together. But for the purposes of this demo, let's just go with what we've got. So once again I'll quickly I, J, oh I got a D in there, okay, that's alright, and then we press enter. It's sitting waiting because it's now received them, and I didn't sit waiting at the end, so let's do a quick demo once again. Console.read key, so all I'm going to do is just have a cursor flashing at the very end so that it waits for a key to appear so you can actually see the output. B, C, D, E, F, G, H, And last one, there's our console sitting there waiting for me to press enter to move on to the next screen. And there's my playlist. Your playlist is A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K. Now the final thing, the challenge for you. So we've now got a console application that reads data into an array and displays the data that was in that array. Your challenge is to swap. So what I want the application to do is for the next screen, when I press enter again, go on and say, do you want to change your playlist? Would you like to swap? And what you can do is enter item, let's see, so item 1 there is A and item 3 there is C. If I entered the value 1 and the value 3, then it should be able to swap the values for C and A within my array. Okay, and then redisplay the array so that it says C, B, A, D, E, F, G, H, J, R, F as the values that would be in the song. So see if you can have a go at that challenge. Just one little tip, what you are going to have to do is have a temporary storage location, because if you say that the value that's in number 1 becomes equal to the value that's in number 3 at this stage, then the C is going to overwrite the A, but you're going to have 2 values of C, and so when you write back to value 3, you're expecting the A to go back to here, but it's not going to work. It's like when you swap values around in a spreadsheet. Okay, if you copy the value from one place and paste it over another value, you get 2 copies of that value and you can't copy the original value back. So give that a go, and hopefully you will be able to use arrays as you develop your software programs throughout our assessment task.